Daniel Howat from Next Best Picture. I have been so excited to speak with you. I'm such a fan of the How to Train Your Dragon trilogy, and so when they announced that you would be directing the live action remake, I was very curious and excited. So I'm excited to
Thank you.
to learn more. So I think there's no better place to start than with the very obvious question, of after creating this animated franchise, why take on the remake yourself?
Because Universal approached me about doing a live action reimagining, and I thought if they're going to do it, I wanted to volunteer to kind of basically just to keep the wonder and the emotion intact. And being somebody who's not a fan of this remake trend, I thought if it's going to be done, I at least feel like I could carry over the integrity of what fans like about the animated movies. So it may seem hypocritical, but I did it out of a protective instinct rather than watching someone else sort of reinterpret it.
No, I think that's totally fair. But this is obviously your first live action feature. How different was your pre-production approach? Like, as you prepared to make this, how different was it directing a live action feature from animated films?
It is different, and yet many things are the same. We still go through a design process of working with concept artists and storyboard artists and fleshing out the scenes as written in the script. But there is a whole sort of physical planning part of it where you sit around and talk about, okay, here's how much space we have on the back lot or on the stages, and how much of the set could we fit into it, and what orientation, and where's the sun going to be while we're shooting. And, it's all that sort of consideration that we don't really take in mind in animation. And then there's just working with the actors and kind of getting them familiar with the scenes, with their characters, with each other, and just sort of getting comfortable and sort of creating a safe space for them to play and experiment and go deeper into the characters. So the pre-production part of it was a mix of both, but because I'd watched so many behind the scenes making of documentaries and Project Greenlight and all that sort of thing, I felt like I was at least familiar with the steps we would be going through. Oh, and one of the most awesome parts of it was we got to do a location scout. So it actually meant that we were flying around places that I'd always wanted to visit, like the Faroe Islands and Isle of Skye in Scotland, and cherry picking our favorite coastlines and rock stacks and canyons. And then going back out and shooting aerial plates of those places, and also scanning them so that they could be imported into visual effects and manipulated as we needed.
Had you done any of those like location scouts on the animated versions just for like inspiration?
Yes, for inspiration. Yeah. How to Train Your Dragon 2, for example, Roger Deakins and I went to Svalbard, which is this island archipelago at the top of the world, as close to the North Pole as you can get, in a land of 2,000 people in a small mining settlement, and 5,000 polar bears that will devour you with no hesitation should they decide to. So it was really kind of wild.
Feels applicable.
We're on snowmobiles with shotguns strapped to the back, and just, yeah, it was an amazing and also just wild, truly wild place.
That's amazing. Wow. Well, yeah, animated films go through years and years of revisions and adjustments, and from the outside, it seems like you have a much greater sense of control in an animated film than you do in a live action feature. Was that hard to get used to?
A little bit, yeah. I think we're all control freaks in animation because we can manipulate everything, including the actor's performance. We can cut up different takes of the same line and Frankenstein together our favorite version, and then hand that to an animator who controls everything about the physical performance of it. In live action, I quickly learned that the best thing I could do was get out of the way. Once we'd done all the prep and we set the cameras and we rehearsed the blocking, then you hand it over to the actors. And if they're really committed, as our cast was, and they really know their characters, then it becomes your job to be nimble and kind of watch for all of the evolution and the surprises and the spontaneity that comes out of a rehearsed scene now taking on a life. And they're always searching for a truth in an exchange. And as Bill Pope, our cinematographer on this movie, he always advised me, like, put your blinders on, forget the 300 people that are standing around you. You're watching for truth. And once you get it, you'll know that you'll have it in the editing room. But until you have it, like, just rule everything else out. You're here to be for that moment. And yeah, it was great advice. But that's definitely different from the animation process.
Yeah, did you other than an actor's performance, did you feel yourself having to sort of tone down the control freak part of your brain in many other ways?
Yeah, but I think also in animation, I got this advice early on, and I really believe in it, which is you surround yourself with people who are the best at what they do, and then you let them reign dominion over their departments and their contribution. You get the best work out of them, and also you allow them the opportunity to shine and feel proud of their work. So rather than look over everyone's shoulders and second guess everything that's done, you kind of open it up to the idea that this is a collaborative art form. I've done my part. I'm the steward of the story. I'll always talk about costume or production design or performance from a story point of view. But also, I'm not a costume designer, nor am I a production designer. Like, I recognize the limit of my ability. And so kind of lobbing the ball into somebody else's area of expertise just allows them to really shine as well and feel proud of it at the end of the day.
Well, I do want to talk about your work with Bill Pope on this film. Famously, like you already referenced, you worked with Roger Deakins on the animated films, which helped give those such a cinematic feel. Approaching the live action film and working with Bill, what did you want this film to feel like?
Well, in the How to Train Your Dragon trilogy, we really leaned into a live action aesthetic because we wanted to create a world that had consequence and peril, and it didn't have cartoon physics, and you wouldn't bounce if you fell from a great height, or you wouldn't just end up with a sooty face if you got in the way of a dragon fire blast. So from the beginning, that's why we invited Roger Deakins into the mix on those films, is we wanted that grounded sense of naturalism, and therefore, if the rocks felt like rocks and the moss and the leather and everything felt tactile, then so did the consequence and the peril of this land. So I called, as my first phone call after talking to Universal, I called John Powell and said, talk me out of this if it's a bad idea. The second phone call was to Roger Deakins. And of course, I was kind of testing the waters to see if he would be interested in joining me in this. And he had just come off of like Blade Runner 2049. I mean, he'd done some big effects movies, and I think his appetite for smaller, more intimate films was at an all-time high. So he said, I personally don't want to jump in, but I know exactly the person you should talk to. And he introduced me to Bill Pope. And it's such a wonderful thing because Bill is very story-minded as well. As not only does he have an amazing eye and just a sense of what the palette and the whole thing is going to feel like, he comes at it from a story point of view. And from the moment we started rolling cameras, I suddenly had like great confidence in what the movie could be, because the camera work was so confident. It was yielding shots that didn't look like we were putting on a Viking stage play. This is a world, and it's lived in, and it's textured, and the palette is confident, and the camera work is confident. So I just think that he brought, his very well-trained eye, but also his emphasis on story to the mix in a way that was, he was such a terrific partner, because I needed that. I needed that on set to have a sense of reassurance.
Yeah, at the beginning, you talked about seeing yourself as sort of the steward of these stories, because you've obviously lived in this world for so long. As you revisited this original story, 15 whatever years on, did you feel your relationship to the material had changed after this time? Did the emotions or themes strike you differently this time around?
They did, because that first movie, Chris Sanders and I, we basically parachuted in as kind of we were the replacement directors and writers of a movie that had 15 months left to its release. So we hit the ground running, and we were just trying to make a movie that worked. We weren't thinking about potential sequels or what, the grand coming of age arc might be over 3 installments, three acts of one larger story. All of that came afterward. And in retrospect, I realized we could play with the, you know, the nuance of the texture of the father-son relationship, for example, much more, or his relationship with Astrid and how that sort of develops from a place of acrimony. And there were opportunities to go a little richer and deeper, setting up the mythology of the tribe in a different way, so you understand why these warriors are on that island in the first place, and the urgency of having been beaten at their own game for generations and wanting to throw in the towel. There are all these things that I could pepper in and yet still follow the storyline, which is, you know, that was sort of agreed upon from the start. The studio wanted that movie, not a movie inspired by How to Train Your Dragon, but they wanted that story delivered with all the bells and whistles of live action and more in every additive way that we could find. So I learned a lot having worked on all three movies, and going back to it, my relationship to it, I think, was even deeper because it's a Hiccup as a character, as an outsider, is someone that I can really relate to. I grew up that way. The idea that he can withstand ridicule and mockery and still follow his gut makes him a hero for a lot of people around the world. And that's what I hear most from fans, is like, we connect to this character who's a misfit that stops trying to change who he is to suit the world and lets the world evolve to change around him.
Well, I know you've talked about seeing the animated trilogy as like three parts of a coming of age story. I know you're embarking on How to Train Your Dragon 2, live action, of course. Are you envisioning the live action, presumably trilogy? I don't know if they've officially said a third film, but presumably, are you conceiving that as a three-part story as well in the same way?
I'm just not making plans. I may want to make a second one based on their enthusiasm for the first, which I think is great. I'm still treating it like it's the middle act of a coming of age, and it's an opportunity to go back into a movie and correct some of those regrets that I have with every movie. You know, could have done that better. But also, I'm just curious about how the world receives this movie, because it is very faithful to the animated original, with embellishments that almost are so subtle that people might even think it's shot for shot, when in fact it is not. But it's there's a sense of I'm waiting to see what the reaction is. If the dominant reaction is we wish we had a different storyline or explored different things within the movie, then that might influence where I go with the second film. But if there's a sense of like, oh, thank God you didn't, you know, completely change the story, because this is a fun thing to revisit 15 years later with a whole new generation of up and coming fans, then I also know there's reassurance in that direction. So we'll see.
Yeah. I mean, you talk about having regrets on previous films. I feel like that's every filmmaker, right? I think of that old quote, something like, you know, art is never finished, only abandoned. You know, when it's just time to deliver it. Is that? I was thinking about that quote as it came to you approaching, you know, this story again, just in a different medium. Do you relate to that feeling of like, at a certain point, I just have to deliver the thing I have to deliver, and was approaching this live action film almost a chance to sort of, you know, do the things you wish you had done?
It was that. And I don't want to make the mistake of seeming like I'm disappointed in the animated movie. I'm very, very proud of it. It's just that we didn't have the resources and screen time to indulge certain aspects that I could go into this time around. And one example is just Astrid. As a character, I think she's really cool, but also would have been fun in the animated movie to better set up where she had come from, how she had worked hard to attain the status of the best of her generation, and how that reflected on Hiccup's sense of privilege, where he's coasting by as the chief's son and not applying himself in her mind. It just created more of a sense of what she has to lose when she decides later in the movie to kind of defy Stoick and step into the ring and support Hiccup. That she's falling from grace in a way that is personal to her. So I think it just makes for a richer character. And we were able to do that this time around. So it's little things like that. I'm super proud of the team that made the animated movie, and I'm proud of the result of what we were able to pull off in 15 months. It's just my regrets more lie in I wish we had a little more time to ... indulge certain things.
That's good. Well, as you do embark on the process of making a sequel, what are your biggest learnings from directing your first live action film that you're going to be taking into your next one?
Well, I think the biggest learnings are you really trust your crew, and try to you've got to be a cheerleader every day. Keep the energy up and keep the enthusiasm up, and you lead by example. So I think my giddy excitement, like I really was like a little kid, on the movie, walking onto our sets and sort of squealing with glee to see everything realized, and that energy and that sort of respect for all of the artistry around me was, I think, was echoed, and reflected amongst others. So even a lot of these kind of hardened, somewhat cynical veterans, coming in to do their job, felt a sense of pride and play on set. And so I think I would definitely want to carry that forward, because those were some cold, dark, wet, somewhat miserable days in Belfast. And I think it was the energy of what we were making that made it all worthwhile.
Yeah, I guess you probably had night shoots. That's something I assume you don't do too often in the animated world.
No, not really. Yeah, really.
That's great. That's great. Well, Dean, before I let you go, I do think it is fascinating that, you and Chris Sanders directed 2 movies together. And of course, the live action remakes of both are debuting, around within a month of each other, and with both of you involved in one of them in some capacity, which is interesting. I'm curious about what conversations.
I was just to that point. It is fascinating that we co-directed and co-wrote both of these. I'm intimately involved, obviously, in the Dragon one. I have nothing to do with the Lilo and Stitch one, and I think people make the mistake of thinking that Chris is more involved than he was. He was only invited back to do the voice. So there is a bit of a difference. Like, I applaud Universal for taking a chance on me, because I think it's the first time they've let somebody involved in writing, directing the animated movie come over and steer the ship on the live action film. So, for better or worse, hats off to them. I appreciate the opportunity, but I also think I think Chris should have been given the chance to write and direct Lilo and Stitch as the live action version, because that's his baby. That story was birthed out of his mind. It's based on his style. It's so much of him. It's his sense of humor, and my part on that movie was I always thought, like, I'm helping Chris make his movie, realize his style on screen and his sense of humor. So it feels like a bit of a miss to not have him involved from the start.
Yeah, I was going to ask if what that experience was like from the outside. You're obviously intimately involved in this one, but sort of watching that one happen from the other side as somebody who helped make the original. What's that experience like? Is it strange? Is it weird? Is it frustrating?
It's all of those things, but I have a lot of really good friends that worked on it, so I'm not going to say anything disparaging about it. And I haven't seen it. It may be great, but I just think that it's sort of a bizarre kind of knee-jerk reaction to go to a completely a separate filmmaker from that. I guess what I'm trying to say is, we go through so much iteration when it comes to putting these animated movies together, years of it, sort of figuring out what worked and what didn't work. To simply skip past that history and go to somebody unrelated to the movie and put it in their hands, it seems like a strange choice to me.
Well, and I think that's why How to Train Your Dragon has turned out as good as it did, because of your relationship to this franchise. I love the movie, Dean, and I'm so grateful for what you brought with both the live action film and the original trilogy. So appreciate your time.
Thank you very much. Thank you. It was going to go one way or the other.
Sure, right.
I'm
glad it went this way.
Prove that theory true of just go to somebody completely unrelated to it, or it might be a benefit. But anyway, we'll see.
Right. Well, Dean, best of luck. I appreciate your time, man. Thank you.